Hi everyone, it's the 25th of October 2010 and I'm Anthony of Revolutionary Jam. There's a lot of talk in the UK right now about these new spending cuts that are coming in under our new government, which is a coalition between the Conservative Party and a party called the Liberal Democrats, who are the third biggest party in the UK after the Labour Party. Naturally, a lot of people are extremely concerned about the cuts. On the other hand, some of the free marketeers amongst you might think this is a good idea and the size of the government's being reduced. I just want to talk quite briefly about some of the consequences of these cuts that are being talked about in the mainstream before going on to giving my own personal take. Well, firstly, I've got some friends in care who are extremely concerned about what the effects will be to those that they rely on public funding to take care of, the vulnerable sectors of society such as the elderly or those who don't actually have the ability to provide for themselves. There are other forms of cuts which are viewed as rather short-sighted, such as those to initiatives and charities dealing with juvenile delinquency. The fear is that cutting spending in those areas will lead to greater costs to society in the future, and indeed to more government spending on
law enforcement
and medical care. Also, naturally, with any talk of cuts to public funding, talk of public sector jobs going comes up. According to one headline, there might be cuts to 500,000 public sector jobs, and the mainstream criticism is that a lot of those people will end up on public benefits, therefore still being a tax burden and not actually effectively reducing the deficit. Another oft-heard criticism in the mainstream is that the cuts are going to affect those on low incomes much worse than those on high incomes. This article says that the poorest 10% who have incomes of under £10,200 will suffer from the reduction in spending on services, which will equate to almost 30% of their annual income, whereas the richest 10% lose services that are only worth about 2% of their net income. So it's seen as a very retrograde, regressive move from an egalitarian standpoint. I've heard persons on the left go as far as to allege that this is deliberate, preconceived class war perpetrated by rich parliamentarians against the lower classes. And of course, many people on the left believe that the real solution is not to cut at all, but instead to just tax the extremely rich. All these criticisms which are discussed in the mainstream are worthy of consideration, but what really annoys me is that on talk radio or the television, when they have the debates, no one thinks to mention what I see as the key point. We are still embroiled in two massive wars that are costing billions of pounds and thousands of lives every year. When they talk about cuts to spending, don't you think that maybe the wars would be a good place to start?